Welcome everybody to this afternoon special briefing session. It is my pleasure to introduce for you Bill Gates. He has limited amount of time today, and so rather than wasting time on unnecessary introductions, I'm going to ask him to make a few introductory remarks, and then we'll open the floor for questions.
Well, good afternoon. It's great to be here at the AIDS conference. As I said in my speech, it's a time of looking at achievement of the AIDS movement and looking at some incredible challenges as we move forward. The funding constraints are a huge challenge, but there are a lot of things we can do to drive up efficiency in prevention, efficiency in treatment, and I'm also optimistic about the work going on scientifically, both with tools for prevention and also eventually the ultimate tool, the vaccine. With that, we can go ahead.
Thank you, Bill. Are there any questions? Please approach the microphone, and once I identify you, you identify yourself, who you work for, and a brief question, rather than have no long statements. First, go to the microphone, please.
I guess they're back there. Yeah, there are.
Yeah, sorry. The microphones are at the back. Go ahead. First question.
Mehru Jafar, IPS News Service. My question to Mr. Gates is, talking to a lot of delegates here, there seems to be a sense of depression because of the silence of a lot of donor countries vis-a-vis funds for HIV and AIDS. What do you have to say? Because you've made very generous contributions. And what do you have to say for all the enormous amount of money needed still to continue treatment, prevention, and research for the vaccine?
Well, in the last decade, the funding by rich country governments of health issues has gone up very dramatically. And it's been great to see that. There's been unbelievable success stories, whether it's in new vaccines or vaccine distribution. Actually, the biggest increase has been in the area of AIDS. A huge, actually unprecedented amount devoted to AIDS programs. The problem that we've run into, which is very disappointing to me and everybody who cares about the AIDS cause, is that the rapid increase has now, on balance, stopped. You have some countries who are actually cutting. You have some countries who are doing modest increases and some who are doing better than that. But on balance, the amount of money per year will be only slightly greater in the next year. And because we don't have a cure, as you put people on treatment, that's lifelong treatment. So all the new people you put on treatment just increase the number that you need drugs for. And so in my speech, I talked a lot about how we need to take the best practices in reducing personnel costs and do some of the things we've done on drug costs to try and drive up that efficiency. So there's definite consternation that people wish that the growth had continued, and it's not. Now we need to tell the success stories. We need to drive innovations. We need to prove we're using the dollars well, and hopefully we'll go back to the increases because certainly they make a huge difference. 5 million lives, 5 million people on treatment that without that generosity simply wouldn't be alive. And what that means for these societies is quite dramatic.
Next question.
Yeah, my name's John Morris from the Austrian Times Group. Before you came on, we had a press conference with 4 wonderful people, and they were talking about gender parity. The empowerment of women is a crucial battle in the whole AIDS campaign. How do you, in the Bill Gates Foundation, see this particular battle, and how are you facilitating it?
Well, certainly all the things our foundation does, whether it's agriculture or vaccines or mother and child health, there's a real focus on women as the key factor. In AIDS, the burden is greater in women than it is in men, which is a tragic thing. One of our most successful programs is one in India, where together with the Indian government, through a program called Avahan, we've organized the people who are at greatest risk, who are the female sex workers, and they've gotten together in communities and organized and spread the message of safe behavior. And so condom use in particular has gone up quite substantially. And the key there has been the social marketing, groups of women talking to other women, and that's what we've seen in many of our health things, whether it's mothers getting together in villages to talk about exclusive breastfeeding or using vaccines. It's these women's organizations that can make an absolutely huge difference on all these healthcare issues. So, it's an important thing to look at. Many of the tools we work on are gender neutral and will benefit everyone.
Take a question.
Simeon Bennett from Bloomberg News. Mr. Gates, in your speech you said that when we have new effective interventions, we need to make sure that they become widely available as quickly as possible. Unlike circumcision, which has obviously taken a long time to become rolled out on wide scale. Tomorrow we'll find out whether or not this microbicide worked. I'm not asking you to comment on the result, but if that trial does in fact show efficacy, what do you think the next step should be, and does your foundation in fact have any plans in place to make that product widely available if in fact it is efficacious?
Yeah, our foundation's one of the significant funders for both the microbicide work and the other ARV prevention techniques like a daily pill. The CAPRISA study that reports tomorrow is a tenofovir-based gel, and so we're all hopeful. When any one of these ARV prevention things works, the question is, will it be 1 year, 2 years, or 5 years before it's out there in widespread use, assuming that the effect is rather substantial on the positive side and there's no negative side effects. It's not something that can happen overnight, but it should be achievable that when you have a positive result, it's less than 3 years before it's scaled up quite substantially. You can look through what have been the delays in getting the licensure, the delays in getting the manufacturer, the delays in promoting the demand, the delays in having the capacity. Circumcision, we're finally now, 4 years later, as a movement engaged in significant scaling up. It's good to see, but we shouldn't have that same gap for whatever our next prevention tool is. I'm quite optimistic that we'll have another one. We'll certainly be a funder of those steps, but it's probably more regulatory, social marketing, capacity type things that will be the limiting factor. And so we can use our voice in that. I don't think it'll be a money thing. At least we'll do our best to make sure that's not what determines the timeline.
Next question.
Руслан Подгорный, журналист из Украины. Еще раз, Руслан Подгорный, журналист из Украины. У меня такой вопрос. Проводил ли ваш фонд мониторинг целевого использования средств, которые выделяются на профилактику социально опасных инфекций, о которых мы говорим сегодня и чему посвящена конференция? И если да, то были ли какие-то выявлены где-либо в мире примеры нецелевого использования? Спасибо.
I'm sorry, non-targeted use, I just caught the end.
Can you repeat the question, please?
Еще раз повторить. Были ли где-либо в мире примеры нецелевого использования донорских средств? То есть, когда они выделяются под какие-то программы, но где-то, может быть, в мире кто-то решил ими воспользоваться как-то по-другому.
Yeah, the question is there any case where donor money was used for something other than what the donor intended it to be used for? And the answer is certainly yes. There's no perfection in any of these things. There's a lot of roads and bridges that were funded and were never built. Fortunately, in healthcare, the degree of that diversion is actually quite low. When you come to things like ARV drugs or vaccines, it's not like somebody who's powerful likes to stockpile ARV drugs. They're not that valuable. And so mostly they get purchased outside and sent in, and then the usage is tracked fairly well. When you get to something like building facilities or paying salaries, you can have some diversion there, and we need to track that. I think in the case of AIDS, the money has been spent fairly well. I think the room for improvement, although we always have to be vigilant about corruption, the room for improvement is more about the design of the system, the efficiency, what personnel get used, making sure there's never stockouts. This is a field where if somebody comes and they can't get their drugs, that is a really tragic thing. Next thing you know, they'll have to be on second-line therapy, which is far more expensive. They'll be having side effects. So the answer to your question is yes, but it's not a significant problem in terms of these health programs.
Next question.
Hello, I'm Mariette Jockert from the Vienna Youth Force. I'm a youth journalist, and I want you to ask if you have a short message for young people.
With respect to AIDS?
Yeah, like an advice, how...
Okay. Well, with respect to AIDS, it's don't engage in risky behavior, and get involved in the understanding the movement and how you can help out. In general, I'm an optimist about a lot of things, whether it's AIDS or the opportunities that young people have because of the innovation that's taking place very broadly.
Next.
My name is Remy Schauer. I'm also a youth journalist under the Vienna Youth Force. Over the past few days, we've been meeting as young people together with established leaders, and we've been looking at opportunities for collaboration. And one of the things that we have come across is the establishment of a youth HIV fund, which is already in place, and some partners have already accepted to contribute. My question is, what is your commitment to supporting young people?
Well, the tragedy of the AIDS epidemic is that it overwhelmingly hurts young people. Girls from age 15 to 19 in many of these countries have a high percentage chance of getting infected. And so it's fantastic if youth around the world feel a common cause and help either raise money or use their political voice to help their government make the trade-off to be more generous for these treatment and prevention things. AIDS is a movement, and we wouldn't be as far along today if people hadn't decided to get involved. And so if you get a group of youth who can, here in this country, get this country to be more generous or raise money, it's an absolutely fantastic thing. You can save a life without a very large donation, and there's lots of organizations out there, whether it's RED or many others that you can give to and know that your dollars are having a huge impact.
Next.
Yes, good afternoon. My name is Eugen Freund, and I'm an old journalist from Austria with the Austrian Broadcasting Organization. Mr. Gates, I don't want to minimize at all the great efforts you are undertaking over the last decade or so. But there's one question which I came across today, and that has to do with your foundation sometimes investing into companies that adversely affect the health of, or could adversely affect the health of the people who live in the vicinity of that company, let's say an oil company in Africa. How do you react to that criticism that at the same time your institutions then have to cure these people from the health effects that this factory produces?
Well, if people would just stop driving their cars, that would help a lot. Our foundation has been probably the most active at reaching out to large companies and getting them involved and using their skills to help the poorest. Whether it's working with the pharmaceutical companies, and we actually have an index that we fund that ranks the various drug companies on how much they're involved in helping the poor. It's called the Access to Medicines Index. We work with food companies, cell phone companies, all these companies to get their innovators involved. And so you're taking what those companies have and using it to help very poor people. In the case of our investments, we vote our shares in terms of our social conscience. We're very careful about that. It's not possible, we're not a court that's judging every company, that we would take away all of our expertise in health to try and do that. And where we own a tiny percentage, our ownership is not the key thing there. It's working with those companies to help them do something that's better. So, we are a huge force in that, and we don't think that if we moved all our investments, into, say, U.S. Treasury bonds, it would be any better, because, the U.S. government isn't necessarily a perfect organization either. In fact, the oil stock held by the so-called social investment funds, by far, their biggest energy stock was BP. So I guess they didn't have a crystal ball, and neither do I. But I do know specifically what we do with companies that get them to be contributing to help the poorest in a very positive way.
Next.
John Cohen with Science. What do you think specifically of the idea of a Robin Hood tax on financial transactions? And have you thought about other innovative ways to raise money? But specifically, if you could address that Robin Hood tax.
Yeah, I know a lot of experts who've said it's not workable, which I was very sorry to hear, because certainly we need more money for these global health activities. But the people who are experts on financial systems in terms of would it be enforceable, would it really work, haven't felt that it would. And the airline tax, Unitaid, which our foundation's been involved with, is an absolutely fantastic thing. I think France was the first to put that forward, but a lot of countries have gotten involved in that. Now there's a movement to, in the countries where it's not mandatory, at least make it easy to do on a voluntary basis. But unfortunately, the financial tax, I haven't heard any experts who are saying that that's something that's likely to happen, or it's easy to define it in a way that it wouldn't be subverted.
Just a quick follow-up. Have you discussed it with Warren Buffett?
Actually, I've discussed it with lots of financial experts, not Warren in particular.
Next question.
Good afternoon. My name is Guillermo Lobo, Channel 13, and TN Buenos Aires, Argentina. The economic problems and the natural disasters could be a big challenge, a new problem in the battle against HIV?
Yes. Yeah, the government generosity, rich government generosity to AIDS and other health issues would clearly be much higher if their economies were continuing to grow at a very rapid rate. And so it's an unfortunate side effect that the people in the greatest need, the poorest, are deeply affected in this very indirect chain of events by what's happened to the global economy.
Next.
Gus Cairns, AIDS Map. If PrEP's successful, who is going to use it, and who is going to decide who gets it? And if I can ask one on microbicides as well, if the microbicides are successful, their products are then going to be used in sex when people are having fun. Do you think we should market them as over-the-counter products, even if they contain ARVs?
Well, certainly things like condoms are marketed over the counter, and the reason you don't market things over the counter is if you think there's some mode of usage that would be harmful, that you want to have a doctor involved in making sure the right people use it and it's used in the right way. And so it'll largely depend, in the case of take a microbicide, what side effects are seen and whether you have to be careful to make sure whether that's going to create drug-resistant HIV. There's some hope with the microbicide that because the place where the drug is very localized, that even if you have a breakthrough infection, that you wouldn't have drug-resistance disease. Now, it's not known. That's one of the things that the money goes into in these microbicide trials, is to look where there's a breakthrough case and actually look and sequence it and say, okay, did it, say tenofovir or ARV, did it develop the known mutations that create that drug resistance there? So if things are really look good on a microbicide, then it should be possible to make it generally available, just like condoms are generally available. Hopefully, it looks like the gel would be inexpensive enough that you wouldn't have significant access issues, that you'd be able to make it very broadly available. I think compliance is one of the great concerns because there's approaches that are coitally dependent, where you ask people to use it either before or both before and after a sex act, and there are approaches that involve daily dosing. And those are being tried out in the various trials, not just the one that we'll report this week, but there's several trials that are in the next year or 2 years. So we're going to have a lot of data about this. And as I said, I'm a big believer that if we get positive results, we need to understand very quickly if there are drawbacks, and then figure out how to get that accessibility to be extremely high. Because whenever you have an epidemic, every case that you avoid actually has this exponential effect of further cases that are avoided. And if you can get a high enough usage of things that block transmission, then you can have communities where the infection rate can drop pretty rapidly. Now, in the numbers I showed in my speech, I took a 20-year period, and I took reasonably conservative estimates for what could be done. But if things go super well on the PrEP in terms of its effectiveness, its compliance, how smart we are about distributing it, you could see scenarios even more positive than the ones that I showed in my speech. And we're certainly putting a lot of money into that. There's a lot of energy around this. It's one of the advances that would be very, very timely.
Next question.
Thank you. Luc André from AFP. You and other speakers emphasize male circumcision. Don't you think it will reduce the awareness that condom use is still far more effective? Thank you.
Yeah, that's a very good question. And in fact, whenever trials of a prevention technique are done, you want to look carefully to see if there's the effect that you referred to, which is often called disinhibition. That is, because you're using a tool that, male circumcision is great. It's a 60% reduction in female-to-male transmission. As you suggest, it's not nearly as good as using a condom. That's very high, over 90% reduction in both male-to-female and female-to-male. And so you wouldn't want to introduce it if you thought the disinhibition effect would offset substantially that gain. And of course, that may vary by community, but the communities where male circumcision was tested, and these were very well done tests, they did not see a significant disinhibition effect. Now, we need to continue to monitor those things, and if you started to see that, you would want, before you withdraw the tool, you'd want to do the social marketing to educate people about how they were putting themselves at risk. But right now, it looks like it's fairly additive on top of the other tools people use, and it's not causing behavior disinhibition to offset a substantial part of the gain.
Next question.
Hello, I'm Kate Kellen from Reuters. 5 years ago, you said you would eat your hat if there was a vaccine developed within the next 10 years. Are you any more optimistic now? And could you put a time frame on that optimism, if you have it?
Well, I would love to eat my hat, but it would require, to have a vaccine generally available in 5 years would require really unbelievable breakthroughs at a rate that are very, very low probability, even though we'd all celebrate. The best case now probably is 2 rounds of trials, which would be 4 to 5 years. And so if you multiplied that out, you'd say best case, 8 to 10 years. It is a possible case. It's not necessarily a likely case. You know, I wouldn't even give a number for that. It could take 3 or 4 rounds of trials. This is it's very state-of-the-art work in terms of understanding this disease of the immune system, but there are very positive scientific results. These new antibodies are a huge advance. The signal we saw in the RV144 trial has got people thinking about how you can get a sterilizing response in mucosa that hadn't been focused on. And it's actually interesting, when they saw that, they realized the animal models they were doing didn't match up very well. And so they're looking at new ways of doing the animal models to further inform us. And there's about 3 or 4 more trials that are going to start in the next couple of years. And the goal is not to have those be 6-year trials. The goal is to have them be 3 to 4 year type trials. So, you know, that's my best sense of where we are. And I hope it's on the low end of those things. It's great that it is being funded. We're one of the funders. There's many others. It's great that research continues and that there's great scientists who are making progress. It's unfortunate we can't give people a specific date, because they would love to have that, but we don't know it.
We're going to take 2 more questions, one here and one there, and that would be it. Please.
Hi, I'm Imani Krishnarao with Doordarshan, the Indian Public Broadcaster Television. Mr. Gates, you mentioned about the Avahan project in India, and your foundation, along with some NGOs, has empowered the female sex workers and brought down the high prevalence rate. But the issue is, if the female sex workers want to live on their own without any stigma or discrimination, there are not enough income generation projects. Do you plan to extend the project of the Avahan to include more self-sustaining initiatives or projects?
Yeah, certainly a lot of funding has gone towards the creation of those communities. And once you get those communities organized, they are very strong. They want to stay together. They want to do a variety of things in terms of informing each other and helping each other. Our work there was aimed at reducing HIV transmission, increasing condom use. That was what we went in to do. Now we're in a process where the Indian government is taking over some of those sites over about I think it's a 5-year period. And they're looking at what other things they want to add to the program. And so, you know, the self-help thing is not our primary focus, but it was wonderful to see that come out. There were a lot of benefits that came out of the program in addition to its primary goal, which was the reduction of HIV transmission.
One final question.
I'm Gwenadiel from the Mountain Kingdom of Lesotho, and I'm here with the World YWCA. My question for you, Mr. Gates, is we do recognize that there's a shrinking pie of resources. What I'd like to know from you is, we know that women's organizations are concentrating very much on young women, especially those living with HIV and AIDS. I'd like to know what your organization is doing to ensure that young women remain a priority in this AIDS era.
Well, we work through a number of partners. We just talked about the Avahan program in India that was totally aimed at women and including women of all ages. We're a donor, largest private donor, not nearly as big as some of the governmental donors, largest donor to the private donor to the Global Fund, which has a lot of programs aimed at the self-help groups and women. And many of the tools that we've worked on are particularly like the gel, that's a tool aimed at young women being able to protect themselves. And in fact, if you look at the generalized epidemic, it's the very youngest women who are the age 15 to 19 who are in particular victims of this, and that's an incredible tragedy. So we try to keep that in mind in the things that we do. Some things like vaccine research are not in the field, not gender specific, but a lot of things about thinking through the design of the gel and how trials are done are very much getting women together and understanding what they think about these tools. I've had a chance to sit in a number of focus groups and learn about that. So we're trying to have that be a priority. Basically, if we want to reduce AIDS, you want to not only have the tools, but have the behavior change and the empowerment that can help reduce the epidemic.
At this time, I'd like to conclude the press conference. It's 3:30 sharp. I want to thank Bill Gates for traveling all the way to Vienna to be with us. He is a tremendously generous supporter of all our work, and I would like to give him a round of applause for that.
Thank you. Thank you. Good job.